Well, hello everyone. I got a new hairstyle. I'll go ahead and say that as if you didn't already know. Um, but I'm not going to talk about that today. What I want to talk about is digital amps and digital modelers. I guess even to a certain degree, maybe computers and virtual amps too. Although I don't really use those that much, to be honest. Um, So versus good analog amps, tube amps, and things like that. There's a lot of controversy as to which has superior tone, and so on and so forth. I think this is probably the best way to sum this argument up from my experience and research. Um, it's basically with good analog amps, you don't have to do as much tweaking and things. Like, it's pretty much like set up, ready to go. If it's a good amp, you can just twiddle some knobs and bam, you got good tone in theory. Um, the digitized stuff, the main problem is that people give up too easy. So instead of really tweaking everything and like getting in there, instead of playing around with stuff, getting in there and like really listening, and not just like in your studio or wherever you're playing, but also in your car. Listen to it in a live venue. Listen to it various places on your phone, and you start playing with the feel and the tone, and you start changing settings and things like this. It really just takes like days, sometimes weeks or months, I feel like, to dial in really great sounds with some digital equipment. But once you do it, I mean, you have like a sound that you can, you know, it's something special. It's something that sounds pretty unique. Um, and also, you have the benefit of not having to use microphones and things like that, to mic everything up. But the main takeaway from this basically is that people give up too easily with digital gear. Um, I mean, I've gotten in there and just like, make minor adjustments on things, just gain levels, and how, like, to the percentage point, how much compression is on that channel, that signal chain or something. Do I want to dial in just like a really subtle, like 7% chorus effect, but you can't even hear it? It's just like it kind of gives it like another dimensional, like 3-dimensional quality when you do stuff like that. Um, like playing with the reverb and the delay settings. So like sometimes I'll be writing a new patch, like a clean guitar patch, and basically, and I make minor adjustments all the time. I mean, I'm constantly changing settings and doing this and blah 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 blah. Like the other day, I made an adjustment to my main patch. I just pulled the gain on the amp down 3 ticks, like 3 clicks, and now it's like it's just below the point of what you would call breakup on like a traditional amp. And I'm getting like pretty good results with that, like a nice, thick, clean, jazz, boxy kind of a quality. But it's like multi-purpose because it's kind of like the ideal clean guitar tone as it is filtered through the lens of the person who kind of like looks to jazz guitardom or whatever as like the benchmark for achieving like a pleasing sound. I understand that there's all kinds of different clean sounds. Like you can have jangly Rickenbacker, you can have chimey Strat stuff, and obviously the bridge pickup on the Telly. I've used those sounds. I appreciate them for what they are. I'm just kind of saying that what is interesting about this is that this approach that I'm talking about with the guitar, the filtering it through the lens of a jazz sort of aesthetic or something. I don't want to say ideology, more like a jazz aesthetic. You basically end up with, something that's like suitable for solo guitar performances of just about anything. And then it can blend in with other instruments. It can be subtle and soft. It can be powerful. It can fit in a venue and have a very powerful sound, but you're not relying on distortion, and you can also still do all of your polyphonic type stuff, or play these chords that if you you want it, obviously if you put on like a bunch of stuff so it sounds like Alan Holdsworth's clean sound or Eric Johnson's clean sound, you can play all these lush pretty chords and it's like, oh wow, it sounds so good. I totally get that, and I do use that sound for certain things, but sort of what I'm talking about though, I went on a complete tangent. Sort of what I'm talking about is like, you kind of have to think of it as like your ideal tone, right? After, like if you were going to play a lead line, you're going to play chords, you're going to play fully polyphonic, and whatever. What could you use with your clean that you use? Could you use that clean on what I just said, those three areas? And if you're saying no, then I think you kind of understand what I'm trying to go for with the jazz aesthetic. It's kind of like you can do all those things. And it carries itself well, I feel like. Whereas the other sounds are kind of like niche. They're like something you use for a specific purpose, but it's not like your baseline thing that you go to immediately. Anyway, enough of that. I wanted to clarify some of that because some of the people commenting on various videos on this channel kind of, pointed out that why don't you use effects and stuff more and all that, and I'm like, well, I really think of like the synthesizer patches and the other types of sounds I use, this acoustic simulation, all these different things. I kind of think of those as being the effects. Okay, so like not even effect. You're using a guitar effect to try to make it sound different. So instead of using like a lot of flangers and ring modulators and all this stuff, I'm just kind of like changing the whole sound of the guitar to something else, right? And I kind of think of it like that. So like I'll be using, like in the last video I did, it'll be like a bunch of synthesizer stuff that's more like somebody playing, comping and like a right hand part, like Chick Corea or somebody would do, and then go over into like, switch over to like regular distorted lead and kind of do that, because I like the dichotomy between those two things, and it makes the trio sound kind of quartetish a little bit. It sounds definitely like there's more people there. If you're not really like focusing and you're just kind of like idly listening to it, you're kind of like, well, there's like 4 or 5 people playing, right? It kind of has that quality because you don't place the synthesizer as being a guitar too. But anyway, got sidetracked again. Yeah, so the thing with digital equipment is a lot of people just don't spend enough time with it. Like they don't, really get in there and like fix it the way you like, then play with it for a few days and then like see, this doesn't sound like I want it to sound. I don't change this up, or I want to change that. And then start making those adjustments, or even like start over with a different amp, a different amp sim, and then, kind of like try different ideas, stack stuff on top of each other, do different EQs. Because it's all like the modern guitar tone is basically about like staged layers. So and if it's distortion, it's like gain stage layering, because like a lot of the popular sounds, for rock and metal and stuff like that, it's all about gain stages. When it saturates, and does it saturate over into like the next distortion? Because a lot of them, it's a lot of amps, I think, will layer distortion levels, like the way it loops. I've kind of studied it a little bit, although I don't really know the terminology, or how to describe it in a diagram perfectly. But a lot of these amps, they loop circuits back in on itself, and they kind of, sometimes they'll have like a clean layer that blends amongst all the others too for the final output. So yeah, there's experimenting with that, like having one amp, if it's a distortion sound, like one signal amp chain is like, kind of just barely clipping kind of a bluesy sound, and then the one above it's like high gain, and then you find the EQ and the levels to like blend the two together, and it becomes this whole other sound. It's, I've been doing that kind of thing for years, but I've put a lot of effort into doing it with the clean sound, because I want like a complex thing. A lot of people are confused when they hear me play all this stuff. They're like, I don't understand how you're doing that. Why is it that it's like when I plug in my guitar and just put it on clean, it doesn't sound like that? And it's because, you have to like think of it the way like an acoustic physicist would think of it, like somebody that's tuning a piano or something, up to the point that you're like analyzing the bass response levels and frequency versus the highs, because people don't balance their guitar. This thing right here, I've been playing with it. It's finally getting like settled in, and I've got it set the way I want, but it takes time and just some listening and playing around with it, because the feel is a very important thing for your tone. If your feel is not the way you want it to be, it will be very difficult to get a good tone out of your amp and guitar. And I'll swear to God, sometimes it's like the tiniest little pickup adjustment, and it changes the nuanced feel of the thing. Now, if you're just banging around or like using a pick and picking really hard, you're probably not going to notice any of this stuff. So it would be changes in other ways that make a big difference to you. But if you play more nuanced fingers, legato, tapping, even with a pick, but like not like really digging in and, rocking out, you'll notice the difference. And it's a weird thing. I've heard other people talk about this. Like they'll play certain amps and certain things, and they'll kind of be like, this amp, it messes up my fingers when we play live. Like it's so loud, but it's fighting me or something weird's happening. And all of that crap could be a million things. It could be like, the sound from the speakers is like going back toward the pickup, and there's some weird phase cancellation shit happening with a frequency range or something like that. And again, a lot of the guitar tone and just the thing about the guitar is in the mid-range frequency bands. And a lot of people, will just take all of it out almost to make like a real, like that classic metal guitar tone. But the power and the tone is like in the mid-range of the guitar. The high end is just like a presence control in many ways, depending on what kind of style you play. If you're like a Strat player and like you play all of these cluster chords and things like that, the high end might play a different role for you, because it sparkles a little more with single coils a certain way. But that's a whole other thing I don't want to get into. But anyway, the point is I probably talked. How long have I been talking? Yeah. Go ahead and wrap this up. I just wanted to basically say that I think a lot of people don't spend enough time messing around with their digital amps and modelers and things like that. You pretty much have to just really get in there, explore every feature it has, and just make certain changes and really listen. Turn it up, turn it down, record it on video, record it on audio, and like listen. I do this a lot. Like I'll record the audio of just like a solo guitar sound, and I'll listen to everything really critically. Like, here's the bottom end. How much of the comping on the underneath the lead line on the right hand? Like, how are they balanced? Does that sound too like messed up, or like is this jutting out on the left hand? And like, oh, what about when I play this kind of a bass part on top of another thing at the same time? Like, and like, how does that chord sound? Is it distorting? Is it, like, and there's just so many little considerations, and then that kind of leads you to go back to the guitar and start making little adjustments, pick up pole heights, pick up angles, like where you're putting your tone control for like that kind of a jazz sound. Adjustments to a lot of times, that's another thing I'll say. That's the final thing, I promise. That's another thing that I do is I usually will get the action pretty low, right? And then everything's like real light to the touch. And then what I do is I go up to the first string, the highest string, and then I raise the action on the highest string, and then I play with that for a while. So it's like almost like there's a scoop. It's like pretty low all the way till you get to the first string, and there's a little bit of a scoop up, like a ramp up. And you may be going like, well, why did you do that? The reason why I do it is because when you're playing way up high on the first string, because it doesn't have a lot of mass, when it's super low, it just chokes out. It just gets choked out because it just doesn't have enough mass to make a bigger sound. So you have to raise it a little bit so that it has more, slightly, just barely slight. I mean, I'm talking not even, the hex wrench turn, like just, maybe like a quarter at a time, until it gets a sweet spot where you can like hit that note and it goes all the way to the fret, but there's enough travel distance that it makes a stronger sound. And then that compensates for the extra mass of the B string and the G string and so on and so forth, because all of those can be lower, but sometimes not the B string. So sometimes it kind of ramps up at the B string. That's the ideal action adjustment. And I feel like that works too for balancing out just fingerstyle, probably with a pick too. That way you've got less buzzing and fret outs and weird things happening up on high. So it has like a little bit of a brighter, stronger sound right there too. Yep. So that's pretty much it. So again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to play around with your digital amp modeling more.